I've been asked by a number of people through private messaging to actually do some legal topics in an informal manner. And three questions that came in where people asked to not be identified, probably understandably, is I think a common theme that we get asked a lot at the Bianchi Law Group. And it's essentially, what is the number one or couple of things that young people, young adults, and or teenagers get into trouble with? As former prosecutors at the Bianchi Law Group, we have pretty good experience in that background from the prosecutorial side, but also with our criminal defense clients that we're honored to represent. And I thought about that, and essentially I'm going to go through three areas that we see commonly that forever affect kids' lives. And some of them may seem relatively minor to you, but you have to keep in mind the collateral consequences, that we call it, of what happens to these kids after the arrest and prosecution of the case. That is records. They go to get licensed either as attorneys or doctors or accountants, or want to be in law enforcement, a whole plethora of areas where background checks will show some contact with the criminal justice system, and very well could be the determining factor not to get a job. So I think that this message is imperative to people to ensure that they get out to their kids. And I think it's something that they should look at. And I want to thank my good friend Angela Kubisky. I see she's on right now, and Mayor Sam Morris, my good friends here in Morris County, who've always supported our endeavors as prosecutors, and as well as at the Bianchi Law Group. They're great people. And Angela was a person who has actually incentivized me to do these informal videos, which have really gone off the hook, if you will, in terms of people debating certain topics. So what is the number one thing that we see in terms of young people getting into trouble? And this just doesn't involve young people, it's also adults too, and that's driving under the influence. The consequences to driving under the influence, even though it's just a traffic ticket, are huge in and of themselves, including insurance surcharges, loss of license, extraordinarily high fines, and something that is now on your driving abstract. That's in and of itself. But God forbid there's an accident that they're involved in and somebody is injured, and or God forbid somebody dies. And we see this all the time, and I can't impress upon it enough. And I ask that you show your family and your friends and your kids this video. There is nothing more heartbreaking than to take a young person, especially, who has done and lived an otherwise impeccable life and has a bright future ahead of them, and just because of getting into an accident, may not have even been because they were under the influence, but they are, and somebody dies. When I first started prosecuting cases like this as a young assistant prosecutor in Hudson County, the plea offers were for probationary sentences. Today, they're for many years in state prison. Nothing was more heartbreaking to me, even as a prosecutor, than to take a young person and, because of an accident, something that they did not intend to do, had a catastrophic result, and now putting people in jail for up to 5, 10, sometimes 20 plus years, depending on how aggravating the case is in terms of recklessness. So I implore you to let your kids see this. It can happen. They always think it can't happen to them. It happens with great frequency, and not to mention the fact that they have to live with the fact that they actually were part of something that killed another human being. So that's the number one thing. The other one that we talked about in another informal video is being under the influence of prescription medication. That's right, folks. I said it, prescription medication. Hi, Adele, my friend from Providence College. Good to see you guys. And Beth, great to see you. Thanks for joining. So being under the influence of prescription medication that is considered a central nervous system depressant where you get into an accident is more and more frequently now being charged as driving under the influence as well. If there's a death or an injury, a criminal act as well. And people will say, well, I've been taking this medication for 20 years and I've never had an adverse effect. I personally think that these cases are going over the line in terms of what prosecutors are doing with them. Nevertheless, we have at least 2 or 3 cases right now where people are charged with being under the influence with DUI. Thankfully, we don't have, well, actually, there is one that we have where there was a fatality, and we're defending that case to say it wasn't the medication, it was just an accident. So tell your kids, DUI, number one. The other one is drugs, being around drugs. People do not understand kids, and they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. They may not even be doing the drugs. If you see drugs being done, the kids need to know, turn around and get out, because just being in the mere presence, even though legally mere presence is not enough, you are going to get arrested. So if somebody's in your car and they've got drugs, or if you're in a room and people are doing drugs, kids seem to think, well, I'm not doing them, so what's the big deal? They need to get out, call their parents, call whoever they got to call, and get away from that scenario. I cannot tell you how many times kids who were not actually using the drugs were arrested along with other kids who were using drugs or in possession of drugs. And then you got to hire a lawyer like me to battle it out with a prosecutor to say you should dismiss this case, which after the police charge sometimes is hard to do. They rather plea bargain the case. And if you plea bargain a drug case, that is stickered onto you pretty much virtually for the rest of your life under our current laws, and can affect their job prospects. So they may say it's just weed. They're going to legalize marijuana soon. What's the big deal? It's a huge deal. So make sure you let them know that. The other one is internet, and social media posting. Ask your kids this question when they're taking these selfies. That's right, taking their own selfies of themselves naked if they're a minor, and then taking it and giving it to their boyfriend or their girlfriend. Do you know that is the manufacturing and production of child pornography, and then the distribution of child pornography? Again, a charge as prosecutor that I would not have brought, but the prosecutors have wide discretion, and we're seeing more and more. Let's say a 15-year-old girl takes a naked picture of herself, sends it to her 15-year-old boyfriend. Well, now the girl is being charged with production and manufacturing of child pornography for taking her own picture and distributing it to the boyfriend, and the boyfriend is now in trouble in this scenario for being in possession of child pornography. So you got to be very careful. There's also another thing where people seem to think that the 16 is the age of consent to have sexual relations. I don't want to go through a big legal thing here right now because there's state law and there's federal law, but let me just give a word to the wise. Under 18, you could have a huge problem, especially if you're using one of these, a cell phone or a computer, and you're engaging in sexual relations with a minor, which may be not a violation of state law, but using one of these devices could in fact become a violation of federal law. And we have a couple of cases like that. I see Tina Roth is joining us, and Angela's still with us. And hello, Tina and Angela. Thanks for staying on. So those are the three: the DUI, being under the influence. Do you know that if it's reckless conduct, driving as well? Let me go to one more area. Driving recklessly. It used to just be DUI, but it's not that way anymore. Recklessness is just where your conduct is such that it created a possibility or probability that somebody could be seriously injured or die. So now we're getting into a whole expansive case of distracted driving. These are the cases that we're seeing coming into the office. Not paying attention to the road, person driving and the sun was in their eyes and they didn't stop, cell phones, speeding. Tell your kids all of these actions, if they result in injury or death to another person, are now being charged as serious crimes. And personally, again, I think we're going a little too far. What was previously considered to be just an accident is now being criminalized. When you get into that vehicle, you need to, hello, Lisa, good to see you, and Bob. You guys need to make sure that you tell your kids everything you do in that car that could be considered reckless, that causes an injury to another person, is more and more being prosecuted. And people look at this and they're in shock when they come into your office and they say, I don't understand this. How could I be charged with committing a crime? Well, if it's considered reckless, and reckless is a very expansive term, whether it's speeding, distracted driving, texting, being on the phone, not paying attention to the road, what was previously an accident, as I said, can now be criminalized with massive state prison sentences. Again, I don't necessarily agree with that as prosecutor. I always used to love the fact that people thought I was a hard prosecutor and that people thought I was an easy prosecutor. Well, what we were trying to do, not that we're perfect and not that we're always right, is balance. I mean, you want to have balance. You just don't want to criminalize all behavior, although unfortunately today, I think my personality and mentality is a lot different. I think a lot of behavior that should not be criminalized is criminalized. So we have that DUI, reckless driving, drugs for the kids, and use of internet and social media, where they're just putting out into the world things where Prosecutors and police don't have to do anything other than screen capture, and they've got all the evidence that they need. Be careful with regard to those pornography statutes for those young kids, because that's a common one with the kids, young teenagers sending pictures back and forth, naked photos. That is the distribution and possession of child pornography. Hey, listen, folks, on every Sunday at 10:30, this is inspired. Hey, Pete Monteverdi, my good friend from Seton Hall Prep. Great to see you guys. I appreciate all the support you guys always give. I've been asked these questions, and I got a couple of more in the queue that people have asked me. I thought that this was very insightful by those 2 or 3 parents that want to know whether the major areas that their kids could get jammed up. So we'll be doing this on every Sunday at about 10:30 a.m. We'll be going live, and I would ask that you guys share these videos. I greatly appreciate it, and please, I'm asking. I started a new YouTube channel because we're putting these informal videos on it. It's actually a link in this description right here, and it's at Robert Bianchi Esquire ESQ. I'd ask that you join that YouTube channel, and there's going to be more of these informal videos. And listen, if you have family or friends that ever, unfortunately, are in need of a criminal defense attorney, myself and my partner, David Bruno, are 2 New Jersey Supreme Court certified criminal trial attorneys. There's only about 250 out of 98,000 lawyers in New Jersey. God help us, all these lawyers. But we're really proud of what we do with our prosecutorial background and being able to leverage that favorably for people in the criminal defense cases, domestic violence cases, and municipal court cases that we handle. So consider referring us to your family and friends. I look forward to it. I may do another informal video during the course of the week when I'm doing other media. I usually like to do that on the topic that we're talking about. But 10:30 on Sundays, I'll be here. Thank you, Frank, for joining us. And I see that some people are commenting, so I will respond to those comments when we get done with the video. And again, I greatly appreciate if you could consider joining the new YouTube channel at the link listed there for Robert Bianchi ESQ for more of these informal videos. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.